Fellas, remember a few years ago when Dagestanis were labelled as these boring wrestlers, you know, just crotch sniffing, just no personality, just completely boring? I've been looking at the recent roster of Dagestanis and I've realised that a lot of them aren't actually boring, and in fact, most of them are strikers now. Everyone in this list right here that you can see, all of them, I guess you can kind of exclude Islam because he's more well-rounded than just a striker, but the rest of them are mainly strikers. And this kind of, we can't forget the OG striker as well, you know, Zabit Magomed Sharipov, who unfortunately had to leave the sport, but it's kind of just mad how the Dagestanis have gone from these stereotypical wrestlers who, you know, just double leg takedown the way to a decision, to now being actual dangerous strikers, and really well rounded as well. And it's kind of crazy how this happened. Like, I mean, it just happened last night with Johnny Walker getting knocked out by Magomed Ankalaev, which, listen, we all knew Magomed Ankalaev was a good striker, but to knock out a guy like Johnny Walker, who was on a streak as well, you've got to give it to Ankalaev. He's dangerous on the feet, and he's also dangerous in grappling, which is going to be dangerous for Pereira. So if we look at Khabib Nurmagomedov, he's obviously the guy that started this all. You know, he's the one of the first big Dagestanis we saw in the UFC, and I think he started the stereotype of this kind of boring style from the Dagestanis who just go for the double legs and keep you on the floor the entire time. And I think that's where the whole stereotype came from. I think it's from Khabib. But let's take a look at the current Dagestanis with a heavy grappling base. So the Dagestanis that kind of aren't really, you know, much strikers, kind of just rely on the boring style of just taking people down and looking if they can get a submission. So we'll start off Said Nurmagomedov. He's a submission artist. His signature move is the guillotine choke. He can also strike. He's got a few knockouts on his record as well. It's not like he can't strike, but I would count I would count Said more of a grappler, a submission artist specifically. He's got an amazing guillotine choke, but I would count him as a grappler. Then we've got Mohammed Mokaev. I don't know if we can count him as a Dagestani because I know he represents Great Britain, but I think I'm gonna count him as a Dagestani. But yeah, if you see Mohammed Mokaev fight, you'll know what I mean. He's a heavy wrestler, submission artist. I'm not saying he's terrible on the feet, but his fights consist of taking people down, holding them against a cage, and maybe slamming them once or twice. And then, if he's lucky in the third round, he might be able to pull off a submission in the second or third round. So Mokaev's definitely a grappler, but never would I ever, count this guy as a striker. And then I've got Islam. Now it's weird because Islam, I would count it as more well-rounded than rather just a wrestler or just a striker. He kind of likes to use both, but I'm still going to count him as a wrestler. It's still kind of his plan A to wrestle with people. He wrestled with Volkanovski in the first fight. He grappled with Charles Oliveira in their fight as well. Overall, I would definitely count Islam more of a wrestler than a striker, but he's definitely turning into a striker. Let's talk about Islam first of all. Let's talk about the striking part of Islam. And he's first of all the best wrestler currently in the UFC, but to be the best wrestler in the UFC and to go out there and knock out Alexander Volkanovski, I know it was on 12 days notice or whatever, but to knock out Alexander Volkanovski, coming from Islam Makhachev of all people, is crazy. He's got great submissions overall as well on his grappling part, and yeah, the fact that he was able to knock out Volkanovski, even dropping and out striking Charles Oliveira, and we've seen Oliveira do well on the feet by dropping people like Justin Gaethje, knocking out Michael Chandler. Oliveira is not a bad striker whatsoever, and for Islam to go out there and drop him and find a submission from that is insane. Islam's extremely well-rounded. I wouldn't count him, like I said, as just a wrestler or just a striker, but he's extremely well-rounded. And then if we go to the next fighter, which is Magomed Ankalaev, he just won last night by a knockout over Johnny Walker. He's got 0 submissions in his UFC career as Magomed Ankalaev, so I'm definitely not going to count him as a grappler. I feel like he uses grappling as kind of like a last resort. So we're getting to Alex Pereira. If Pereira's going to be smoking him on the feet, I can expect to see Ankalaev going for the takedowns later on in the fight, but he kind of uses it as a last resort. But yeah, this guy's a striker. 6 out of 10 of his wins come by knockout. Just knocked out a great striker in Johnny Walker. Even Jan Blachowicz, this guy was known to be one of the best kickboxers in the light heavyweight division. Ankalaev was beating him on the feet. He definitely used grappling as well, but he was beating Jan Blachowicz on the feet. The only problem with Ankalaev is he can't really tolerate leg kicks that much. He's definitely learned how to check him, as we saw in the Johnny Walker fight. Next fighter as well, Ikram Aliskerov. This guy, amazing striker. He's going to be a problem for people in the middleweight division because of this guy's he's a powerful. He knows how to pick his shots perfectly. He's dangerous on the feet. Coming up from 2 first-round knockouts as well. He's a big prospect in the middleweight division, an amazing striker. Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, the problem with this guy is that he keeps pulling out of fights. I kind of count Umar as a mix of like a grappler and and a striker as well. Kind of like Islam. I wouldn't count him as either one or the other, but he hits like a truck. He hits hard for a bantamweight, and he started to strike more often. We've seen him fall in love with his hands more. Always willing to strike. He's coming off a knockout win as well. So this guy's going to be a problem both when it comes to grappling and on the feet. I can kind of see him being very similar to Ankalaev, but kind of like the Ankalaev is the bantamweight division, whereas a good striker, and he can use grappling as a last resort. But then if we progress, Abbas Magomedov, listen, I know not much people like this guy. He's kind of just being known for having terrible cardio and losing to Sean Strickland, but still, mainly a striker, a Dagestani striker, actually pretty decent on the feet as well. He didn't look bad against Strickland in the first round at all. He was winning that first round against Sean Strickland. Like I said, the only problem with this guy is his cardio. And finally, Sharaputin Magomedov. This guy kind of defies the logic of Dagestanis. He's one of the only Dagestanis in the world who can't grapple. This guy, it's kind of like he's put all his eggs into striking. He's an amazing striker. His kickboxing against Bruno Silva was insane. He's got insane kicks. He's an insane striker. Can't really grapple, which is crazy to say about a Dagestani fighter, but he's dangerous, he's durable, and again, another big prospect for the middleweight division. So if we look at all these fighters and all the Dagestanis, all the top-level Dagestanis that we've got in the UFC, I'd only count 3 of them as being like big grapplers, and one of them, he's kind of a mix of a striker and a grappler. I guess you could count Umar Nurmagomedov as well, but there's really not much just predominant grapplers that are Dagestani anymore. And this is my prediction for the future of these types of fighters, not the individual fighters, but for the Dagestani type of fighters. Now, my first prediction is that we're going to see a lot more Dagestanis champions in the next few years. I think we're going to see Magomed Ankalaev win a belt at light heavyweight. I think we're going to see Umar Nurmagomedov maybe win a belt at bantamweight. Again, I need to see how he does against top contenders. We might even see a few others. Listen, I'm not going to say that Mohamed Makayev is going to become a champion, but the guy's like 23 years old. He's got so much time left. Maybe even Ikram Aliskerov. There's just so much prospects. I could definitely see Ankalaev becoming a champion, though. I could definitely see Umar Nurmagomedov becoming a champion. We've got Islam Makhachev right now, who's a champion as well. And I think the kind of the standards and the, how do I say it, like the number of champions that come from Dagestan are going to increase massively in the next few years. So that's my first prediction for these types of fighters. My next prediction is that they're going to become unstoppable. At first, it felt like their entire game plan was just to grapple. And when I say at first, I'm talking about a few years ago during the Khabib era, when a few Dagestanis were in the UFC. It felt like their entire game plan was survive on the feet and then go for the takedowns. But we've seen recently, especially like I've just said about Ankalaev and Islam Makhachev, they're expanding their martial art. They're expanding their skill. These guys can strike now, and I feel like it's going to become dangerous. Because not only because they're improving their striking, but because of the threat of the takedown, because these guys are known to have insane grappling. When you mix the threat of the takedown with insane striking, people like Ankalaev and all these other Dagestani fighters, they become extremely dangerous. So I think we're going to see a lot more knockouts from these guys, or maybe even a lot more submissions. And I think these guys are going to start becoming genuinely unstoppable. They're going to be incredibly hard to beat. And I think, yeah, that we're going to see a whole new wave of Dagestani fighters winning. And then my final prediction for these types of fighters is that they're not going to be called boring anymore. Why are they boring? I mean, personality-wise, I guess you can call them boring because none of them are really, good on the mic. But if we're talking fight style, I wouldn't class any of these guys really boring. I mean, at first I could kind of understand it because they did have a heavy wrestling base, kind of mauling you to a decision. But when we see people like Sharaputin Magomedov and just a bunch of these strikers in the UFC that are going out there delivering knockouts, and if it's not a knockout, they'll fight to the death. I mean, Islam versus Volkanovski 1 was one of the best fights of 2023. I don't think we can label them as boring anymore. I think we should just accept that they're here to stay, and we should just accept the fact that they're entertaining. Like, they're not boring fighters just because you don't want them to win. I think we've just got to accept the fact that they are entertaining to watch. They're not just these boring hybrid inbred fighters that just came from nowhere and know how to shoot a double leg takedown. But yeah, that's my 3 predictions for the Dagestanis. Let me know your thoughts on them. Do you like the Dagestani fighters? Let me know your predictions for them. But yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of success from these guys. But thank you for watching.